Hurricane Sandy, a killer superstorm, powers winds and water up to 14 feet high into New York City.
Go indoors and stay there until further notice.
Follow the path of destruction from inside the storm, block by block and minute by minute.
The water pulled me out into the street. It was like hell.
From the savage shores of Brooklyn.
Something under the water hit me. I was completely submerged.
To the unprecedented flooding of lower Manhattan.
It was the worst flooding we ever saw in the system.
To the mayhem on Staten Island, where a woman is sucked out of her home along with her husband and daughter.
The water's up to my chin. I'm watching houses spin. I'm watching houses turn upside down.
Experience the most dangerous hurricanes on the planet, as if you were there, caught in the eye of the storm. This is Hurricane 360. Brooklyn, New York, October 29th, 2012, 6:30 p.m. As Hurricane Sandy approaches, the repair and emergency response team at New York City's Coney Island Signal Facility makes final preparations. The site includes a terminal that services 4 major New York subways and is situated near the largest elevated metro system in North America. It's also located just 3 blocks from the famous Coney Island Beach and Boardwalk, which is already getting hammered by Sandy's vicious winds and waves.
All of a sudden, we started seeing water coming from under the doorway, actually coming into the office. So we said, okay, it's a little bit worse than we thought.
Within seconds, 8 inches of salt water seep into the facility, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. They realize they need to evacuate.
We tried the main office door, the front door. We tried to move it, and it wouldn't even budge.
It wasn't moving because of the outside water pressure. You know, I checked the temperature of the door, and I realized the water must have been almost shoulder height for me on the outside of the door.
The rising stormwater is turning the facility into a death trap.
So then we were trying to figure out how we were going to get out.
24 hours earlier, on October 28th, 2012, Sandy roars up the east coast of the United States from the Caribbean. Most hurricanes turn out to sea when they move as far north as New York. But this storm veers left and merges with a nor'easter, a cold low-pressure system powered by the northern jet stream. Hurricane Sandy is now a superstorm. October 29th, 2012, 5 p.m. New York is comprised of 520 miles of shoreline, which makes the expansive metropolitan area particularly vulnerable to flooding.
We have now heard from the city of New York where people are asked to shelter in place. Go indoors and stay there until further notice. That is quite an alarming statement when you think about a city of this magnitude.
The Metro Transit Authority has halted all public transportation in the city. This includes the shutdown of the subway system, something that's only been done one other time in its 108 years of existence.
We start monitoring the weather as it's coming in. So for lower Manhattan, we were predicting a Category 1 hurricane. But as the storm was approaching, it just began to gain more energy.
In preparation for the storm, city workers have placed sandbags and wooden barricades over vents and entrances leading down to the subway tunnels. But as Sandy breaches the shoreline, transit officials' worst fears have come true. The storm could take out much of New York's most vital transportation system.
We couldn't believe our eyes when we saw that amount of water that was already across the streets. It just looked like a lake in front of us with buildings sticking out of it.
14 miles to the south, on the western tip of Coney Island, the private community of Seagate braces for the storm.
I sent officers to house, knocking on doors, stating, you must evacuate. You must leave. This is going to be real. Look out your backyard. Look at the water. You must go.
On Beach 38th Street, on the ocean side of Seagate, 78-year-old Hannah Winkler and her 90-year-old brother Joseph Winkler refused to leave their 3-story oceanfront home.
They just said no, they weren't going to go. My mother loves to watch storms. Being on the ocean, you get to see some great storms.
As the evening progresses, Hannah realizes that this is not a typical storm, as menacing 10-foot waves roll towards her home.
We were in contact with them by cell phone, and she says, oh my God, the storm, the water is coming in, it's getting closer. And then she called and she said the water hit the house.
Staten Island, Yetman Avenue, 7 p.m. Patricia and George Dresch, along with their 13-year-old daughter Angela, gather for dinner. They live in Tottenville, a low-lying neighborhood at the southwestern edge of the borough, which bears the brunt of the raging storm waters from the Atlantic.
My daughter, she went on the beach, and she took a picture of herself that afternoon. And on it, she wrote, Sandy, come to me. I mean, whether she felt something, whether she knew something, whether she sensed something, I don't know.
The family didn't comply with the evacuation warnings. Back in August 2011, they left during Hurricane Irene. However, their neighborhood suffered little flood damage, and when the Dresches returned home, they had an unpleasant surprise.
When Hurricane Irene hit, my house and another house were robbed, and we felt very violated. So my husband had said, if this ever happens again, we're not leaving. And he was firm.
The Dresches' wooden 2-story home is located about 50 yards from the shoreline. That's now getting pounded by the storm surge.
I go to the front door and I see the big waves coming. It was like a tsunami that came up and over. And I said, something's happening out there.
Seawater begins to flood their house.
Now the water's coming in through the back door. I said, we have to go upstairs. My daughter's crying, hysterical. We're going to lose everything.
The Dresches take shelter in a second-floor bathroom.
I figured we were safe upstairs. However, the water came up. It filled, the whole house filled up.
The Dresches are trapped as the pressure and weight of the surging water is tearing the house apart at the seams. Water suddenly breaks through the second floor.
We heard the house crashing out from under us. I thought the whole floor was going to cave in and we were going to go down.
New York, October 29th, 2012, 7 p.m. Superstorm Sandy assaults the most populated city in America. The vicious storm surge blasts through New York's intricate coastline of bays and inlets that act like funnels, channeling in millions of gallons of seawater. With nowhere to go but onto the shores of the city's 5 boroughs.
Whether it be Staten Island down toward Brooklyn as well, the water, unfortunately, is still coming up. This is absolutely unbelievable, guys. It's mind-boggling what we're seeing here tonight in New York.
At the tip of Staten Island, on Yetman Avenue, Sandy's ferocious tidal waves have ripped through the beachside home of George and Patricia Dresch. The couple and their daughter Angela have taken refuge in an upstairs bathroom. But now, floodwater is rushing up to the second floor.
My daughter's very scared. And she says, no, I don't want to die, Mommy. Please, hold me. She's in front of me. I'm holding her like this. I'm holding the sink. We still had about a foot before the whole room was filled out. So I picked her up, and I thought we were going to drop.
Another massive set of waves knocks the house off its foundation. The walls open up, and the roof comes crashing down.
piece of the roof came and hit us in the head. She was on my arm, and I lost her. We went under. The current was too strong for me to hold her. It was out of my control. I couldn't do anything.
The churning waves drag Patricia deeper underwater as her home collapses around her.
As I'm going under, I said they're not going to find my body under this garbage. I didn't want to die. I did not want to die. And I worked myself to get up over that water. And I didn't even know if I could get up because I didn't know what was above me.
Patricia fights her way to the surface. And here's her husband, George, who is still clinging on to what's left of their home.
He was behind me. All I saw was his head, and he was just screaming out, just hold on, hold on, hold on. I was this much away from the phone cables. All I did was reach up, and I grabbed him. I'm calling for her. The water's up to my chin. I'm watching houses spin. I'm watching houses turn upside down. I slid off the wires. A wave came and took me. I left him screaming.
10 miles to the northeast, near Midland Beach on Staten Island. Ayman Youssef, an electronics salesman, opens his front door and is confronted with the full force of Sandy.
I looked toward the beach and I saw a big wave come in, and a lot of cars were on top of that wave. People were tumbling and a tremendous noise.
Within seconds, Ayman's house fills up with ocean water. He never learned to swim, but his elderly mother, Elizabeth, is in even bigger danger of drowning.
My mouth starts going underwater, so I dive in the water and I took off an extension cord from the wall and I wrapped my mouth from her underarm and I lifted her up.
Ayman struggles to keep his mother from drowning as he tries to escape their home. He manages to tow her up to the stoop of his next-door neighbor's apartment, while people are being swept down the street by a swift-moving current of seawater. Some are within arm's reach of him.
I heard the people were screaming, help, help. I was holding to the steps and I was holding to the rail of the steps and I was pulling one after the other. There were 15 to be exact, 15 people. We pulled to the second floor. I felt guilty not saving more people. I was worrying what's gonna happen. Maybe we're gonna die. Maybe another big wave is gonna hit.
11 miles to the northeast, at the southwestern edge of Coney Island in Brooklyn. 78-year-old Hannah Winkler realizes that her oceanfront house cannot take the beating as water crashes through the first floor. She convinces her 90-year-old brother Joseph that they must try to escape.
They went upstairs to the second floor to my uncle's apartment, and while they were there, one of those walls disappeared, and the floor started to topple down to the first place. So there was no way the two of them were going to be able to leave that way, and there was no other exit.
2 miles to the east on Stillwell Avenue, 4 employees are trapped inside the Coney Island Signal Facility, a terminal that services 4 major New York subway lines. The pressure of the rising seawater outside is so strong that it makes opening the doors impossible.
I called Superintendent Williams and Mikey Watts and told them to bring back a rescue vehicle to pick us up.
Well, I come get you from where? Well, I thought you guys was like, no, we can't get the doors open.
The crew has only one hope left.
Our only way to escape would be going through the electric roll-up door in the garage. We knew that that was the only door that didn't actually open out.
But as the electronic door slowly rises, the men are confronted with the full force of Superstorm Sandy. New York City, October 29th, 2012, 7:30 p.m. Superstorm Sandy pounds the city's 520 miles of shoreline. with hurricane-force winds and billions of gallons of water that threatens millions of lives, as well as the vital infrastructure of the city. Former Chief Subway Maintenance Manager Joseph Leader has Ford Transit workers stranded inside their Coney Island signal facility. And he has another pressing worry: the entire 842-mile-long subway system of New York. Since the subway system is an interconnecting network of underground train tunnels, if one part of the subway floods, stormwater could spread throughout much of the system, and the city will be brought to a standstill. The storm surge overtops the banks of Battery Park on the southern tip of Manhattan. The Battery, like much of New York City's waterfront, is built on landfill that is near or below sea level.
From Battery Park City, which is virtually underwater at this time, I'm standing on what little real estate we have that's actually not underwater.
Across lower Manhattan, seawater begins pouring into subway stations, including the South Ferry Station, a busy subway line at the ferry terminal in Battery Park that transports tourists to Staten Island and sites like the Statue of Liberty.
I was stunned when I got down to almost about the third or fourth step before the platform when I realized that this platform was completely underwater.
The biggest immediate danger is the third rail, placed alongside the rails of tracks to provide electric power to the trains. It's been left on in some of the tunnels. Seawater and electricity are a lethal combination and threaten thousands of people still trapped in their homes.
When seawater or water gets near the third rail, it's unpredictable. Not only does that water become electrified, but cables can go to ground, create explosions, which creates more damage. So we began a system-wide shutdown of the rest of the power.
The Metro Transit Authority manages to shut off power in the nick of time. But it's not the only agency concerned about floodwater coming in contact with electricity. On Irving Place, near the East River, the tidal water has risen to an unprecedented 14 feet and short-circuits a utility transformer at a key electrical substation. It blacks out all of lower Manhattan. Over 18 miles to the south, on Midland Avenue in Staten Island, 61-year-old Mary Ann Dano has been sucked out of her home by an overpowering river of water. She desperately searches for something to grab onto.
I was holding on to the top of this fence because there was nothing else to grab on. And I'm like, what do I do now? The water was trying to suck me under. It was like hell. It was hitting me. It felt like something was punching me. And that's when I let the water take me.
Less than a block away, Ayman Youssef had just saved 15 people from the vicious floodwaters. Now, he hears more terrifying cries coming from the street. He sees someone grabbing onto a tree. He also notices a snapped electrical cable dangling down through the branches.
That was a live wire. It came down in the water and stopped sparking. I told the woman, do not move.
Over 11 miles to the northeast, just outside the Brooklyn community of Seagate, Police Sergeant Tommy Karkidi notices a man and woman attempting to drive away in two separate vehicles that are stuck in the rising floodwater.
They each had a car. They were each trying to get their cars to a better location. But the problem was there was nowhere to go. The water was just rising too fast, and it was a dangerous situation. I initially went to the husband's car. So when his car started filling up, we left and waded through the water and went to her car.
But they discover the door is jammed due to the pressure of the water outside, and seawater is filling up inside the vehicle. New York City, October 29th, 2012, 9 p.m. Superstorm Sandy delivers some of the worst Mother Nature can offer. Floodwater comes in contact with electrical transformers, sparking power outages that are affecting 250,000 households in Lower Manhattan.
You've got power surges everywhere. I mean, look at it. It looks like a 4th of July fireworks display over there.
Street signs have disappeared. Parking lots look like swamps. And almost 47 miles of subway tunnels are underwater. Officials worry that they might be beyond repair.
We have 14 under-river tubes. 9 of those tubes were flooded. Various degrees. We had 3 of them that were completely flooded from the track bed all the way to the ceiling. It was the worst flooding we ever saw in the system.
Emergency services are stretched to the breaking point. With over 300 desperate calls or texts per minute. Over 15 miles to the southeast, in the Seagate community of Brooklyn, Police Sergeant Tommy Carchidi just freed a man from his flooding vehicle. Now, they attempt to save the man's wife from her vehicle, which is also filling up with seawater. But the door won't budge.
The water was coming over the window at that point. But then the car started floating.
When a flooded car begins to fill with water on the inside, the pressure equalizes on both sides of the door. Sergeant Carchidi manages to get the door open. He pulls the woman up to the surface of the stormwater and away from the floating vehicle.
But we got her out, and they made it back to their house. So many cars were floating around, and it was crazy.
But now, he's stuck in the rising current as he struggles to get back to the police precinct.
The water was probably at this point midway to my chest, higher. Something under the water hit me, and I fell. I was completely submerged.
Sergeant Carchidi fights for his life against the menacing current.
I struggled. I eventually made it back in. That was probably the most intense and frightening part of the night.
Less than 2 miles to the east, at the Coney Island Signal Facility, 4 trapped employees are blasted by a wall of seawater when they open a garage door.
As the garage door opened, we had this heavy inrush of water, very forceful. It knocked us back. Debris in the facility was being thrown.
I had to fight the current in a way which almost knocked me down. Everything was floating in the garage. We had heavy toolboxes, and they were floating. And as I was trying to maneuver my way around them, it looked like it was actually chasing me down.
The crew barely makes it out of the facility alive. And now they must traverse a raging river of floodwater to reach their co-workers parked on higher ground on the opposite side of the street.
As we exited, it was sort of like being in an undertow at the beach. It was pulling and dragging us back. So we all struggled to get to the vehicle.
The transit crew members aren't the only ones in danger.
And I hear these voices, help me, help me, help me. And I turn around and I see 2 people up to their shoulders in water. And the current was just dragging them away. At that point, I went back and I assisted a man and a young lady back to the truck.
She's in the truck, so now she's hysterical. She's speaking in Spanish for the most part. And I was able to make out that she was talking about her mother.
The young woman points back to her mother, who's farther down the street, and clinging onto a firebox with seawater swirling around her. Steve realizes she could be swept away at any moment.
She was just holding on for dear life. So at that point, me and the young gentleman went back. We got her, and now we're trying to make it to the truck. You know, current of the water is just moving too fast. It was overcoming us.
Steve and the young man don't know if if they have the physical strength to reach the SUV.
They can't make it back to the truck. So at that point, I'm like, Mike, back the truck up. So he puts it in reverse, he backs up slowly.
When I see those back lights come on, I was really happy. I was like, go ahead, Mikey.
But as the SUV backs up, the exhaust and engine go underwater.
The lights on his SUV started flickering on and off, and we were afraid it was going to die. We were going to get stuck.
We opened up the tailgate of the truck and placed the young man and the mother in the back of the truck. And then at this point, there was no more seats left in the truck, so I just grabbed onto the running board. And Mikey started driving away.
We don't know if the engine's going to shut down. And they said, whatever you do, just keep driving. Just keep driving. Keep your foot on the gas. Keep moving.
11 miles to the southwest, on Midland Avenue in Staten Island, Ayman Youssef has just saved his mother and over 15 neighbors. Now, he sees someone clutching onto a tree as a swift current of seawater tries to pull her farther down the street. The person reaches for a higher branch, but it's actually a broken electric power cable. If she touches the live wire, she could be killed.
Told the woman, do not move. I screamed to her, and she heard it, so she stopped because that electrical cable was very close to her, and she wanted just to grab it.
The woman is Marianne Dano, who was just swept from her home a block and a half away. Ayman retrieves the orange extension cord that helped save his mother and lassos Marianne.
I did some loop in the cable, the orange cable, and I threw it to her, and it came on her, and she held on between her neck.
Marianne clings on for dear life as Ayman musters the strength to pull her across the rumbling current.
He pulled me into safety, and then he showed me what I was going to grab onto, which was a live electric cable, and if it wasn't for Ayman, I would not be here.
9 miles to the southwest, in the Staten Island neighborhood of Tottenville. Several hours have passed since the storm surge ripped Patricia Dresch's house apart and swept her and her family away. As she fights to stay afloat above the frigid floodwater, she listens for the voices of her husband George and daughter Angela.
I floated down Yetman Avenue, being pushed around, banged around, trapped in the wood. I kept pushing it off of me. I'm crying, I'm praying, I'm just screaming. I was trying to listen to hear other people crying and screaming for help.
The violent stormwater finally washes Patricia onto higher, drier ground. But her nightmare is far from over. Her body's cut and battered from getting hit by runaway objects. She's also suffering from severe hypothermia.
I was screaming for my husband. I didn't know where I was. I knew I landed somewhere. I held on to a window frame, and I covered myself with a piece of sheetrock. I was swollen. I was a mess. It looked like I got beaten up and left to die.
2 a.m. in the Coney Island community of Seagate. Elderly siblings Hannah and Joseph Winkler have been clinging on to the top of their staircase for over 7 hours, as their exposed, flood-ravaged home is on the verge of completely collapsing. In desperation, Hannah calls her daughter Susan.
She called and she said, aren't you coming to get me out? Half the house was gone. It blew away, floated away. Debris was coming into the house. Well, after that, her power died, and we didn't hear from them.
October 30th, 2012, 2 a.m. Superstorm Sandy, one of the most devastating storms to ever strike the east coast of the United States, pummels the 5 boroughs of New York. Flooded and without power, one of the most important financial centers in the world is shut down.
We've got water that has risen to record levels in many places, including here in New York City. People are being rescued in boats. We understand the subway is flooding, and there's not many ways out of here at this point.
The worst part of the storm is over. But as the rain and flooding subsides, the city's first responders maneuver through the storm-ravaged neighborhoods to search for survivors.
Only after the storm did I realize, wow, what weather can do to us, destroy us.
In Brooklyn's Coney Island neighborhood of Seagate, police officers check the oceanfront homes that were assaulted by the storm.
Most of the homes were just gutted. It seems like the water came in and just sucked everything out. Other than the basic shell of the house.
As the police move down Atlantic Avenue, they hear a wailing sound.
I wasn't sure what it was. Thought maybe it was a cat or a dog or something in distress. Didn't sound like a person at first.
They approach the ocean side of a home. The entire exterior wall has been washed out to sea. They peer inside and realize the sound is coming from a woman.
We noticed Miss Winkler basically holding on to a piece of wood. She was on the floor of the house that was about to fall into the ocean, and she was hanging on for her life. Her brother was next to her.
Hannah Winkler and her brother Joseph have managed to cling on to the banister of their upper stairwell for over 8 hours.
I was yelling and knocking from the inside. I saw the police car looking up at our house with some searchlights. They said, "We see you, we see you."
Actually, she was on a floor that was just teetering. We could watch it go up and down, unsupported. So we knew we had to get her out of there.
There's no access to the second floor of the home because the bottom portion of the staircase has been swept away, and the floor itself is on the verge of caving in. The police must break into the third floor to find them.
We had to quickly ascertain where she was. We started breaking walls, just arbitrarily breaking walls where we thought she would be. We were asking her to scream, to talk loud, so we can pinpoint where she was. We broke the wall in front of us, and they were right below.
And we told Miss Winkler and her brother, you have to get a chair, because we couldn't lean down enough to get them. There was 4 of us, and then we'd all grab each other and pull back. And that's how we were able to get him out. The brother was a little apprehensive, okay? So we had to act fast. Once he was on that chair, we had to snatch him up.
And they took us out. We're lucky, me and Joseph, that we came out of this situation.
Back on Staten Island, the fire department patrols the devastated neighborhood of Tottenville. They notice a faint light and approach the tiny dull glow. They discover Patricia Dresch huddled under a soggy pile of debris and barely conscious. The light that the firemen saw is a tiny keychain flashlight left abandoned in the wet debris.
This is what caught the firemen's attention. This little light was lit near me. It wasn't mine. I don't know how it was still lit under all that water and all that tossing around. I don't know how it landed near me.
Patricia's vital signs are at a critical point. Her temperature has dropped to 81 degrees, causing her pulse and respiration to fall to dangerous levels.
I passed out. I don't even remember the ride to the hospital. I woke up at the hospital. They didn't know if I was going to survive the night. The hot air was blowing on me. They were trying to get my temperature up. I was screaming and crying. My daughter's out there. My husband's out there. Go find them.
Over 8 hours since the storm surge destroyed Patricia's home, emergency teams began a desperate search for her husband and daughter. October 30th, 2012, 8 a.m. The 5 boroughs of New York are still reeling from Superstorm Sandy that slammed onto shore over 24 hours ago. Getting in or out of the city is nearly impossible. All of the public transportation is out of commission, including 9 crucial subway lines.
When you take a look at New York City, power and mass transportation, when those go down, we got a lot of trouble.
The Metro Transit Authority begins a full-scale effort to dredge the tens of millions of gallons of water from the ravaged tunnels. They use diesel-powered pump trains to suction hundreds of gallons of water per minute back into the East River.
We pumped out a total of 66 million gallons of water, utilizing that with 3 pump trains as well as portable pumps that we set up in other areas.
Until the tunnels are completely drained, however, hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers are left stranded in their debris-strewn neighborhoods. Generations of memories have been washed away.
It was like a zombie apocalypse. There were people just walking around in a daze. People were wrapped in sheets, not knowing what to do.
In the midst of the chaos and despair, the city honors the men and women who displayed uncommon courage during the height of the nightmarish disaster.
And we worked together and got through it. To show me how impressive Mother Nature truly is, the power and the force that she can bring on at any time.
I don't think I'm a hero. I don't think I'm anything other than Tommy Karkidi. As bad as things were that night, those are memories that I won't forget.
On Staten Island, Ayman Youssef saved over 15 people during the storm surge. Ayman is so grateful Sandy spared his family that he sets up the Midland Avenue Neighborhood Relief, a volunteer service that continues to feed and clothe the victims of Superstorm Sandy.
My community was poor to start with, so it's not only because of Sandy now, but Sandy did more to the community, and I want to continue helping them.
Approximately 300,000 homes are destroyed across the 5 boroughs of New York City. Economic losses climb to well over $29 billion. But no monetary value can be placed on the human loss the storm left in its wake. Sandy killed approximately 44 people in New York City alone. Staten Island becomes known as Ground Zero. 23 people died as a result of the storm. In the neighborhood of Tottenville, Patricia Dresch's worst fears have come true. Emergency workers find her daughter Angela's lifeless body the night of the storm. Her husband George's body is found 2 days later in a nearby wooded area.
He was a good man. He was a good provider. She was 13. She was afraid to die. She said, "Mommy, please hold me." And I held her. I feel guilty that I feel like I killed her, but they're telling me that I had no control.
Patricia spends a week in the hospital in critical condition. Despite her grave prognosis and the loss of her family, she finds the will to survive.
I'm still scarred. They don't know how I survived. They don't know what made me go on, what made me live through this. This little light was found near me. It was lit that night. I believe my family sent this for me to be found.
The storm reduced the Dresch's home to splinters of wood, but friends recovered 40 buckets full of her personal possessions.
This is her number dog.
Some buried in mud, others washed clear across town.
I don't understand how it came back to me, but special mementos that were meant for me to have came back. They found my husband's wedding ring and my daughter's penance ring and my collection of angels, which is what she is now, an angel looking down at me. Whenever I see her picture, I talk to her, watch over me, be there for me. I can only hold her one more time.
The people of New York show resilience and determination to rebuild their communities, even those that suffered unthinkable tragedy. But they will forever be reminded of Sandy, the storm that showed just how extreme and deadly weather can be.